Cheap whores like you don't belong here." The words hit Emily Carter like a punch to the chest. Victoria Sterling doesn't even glance up from her reservation book. Her thin lips curled in disgust. Emily stands at the entrance of the Obsidian Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant 7 months pregnant, one hand pressed against her swollen belly. Her simple navy dress, her lack of designer jewelry, her arrival by taxi instead of limousine Victoria has already judged every detail. "Please, I have a reservation. My husband." Emily's voice cracks. "Don't lie to me." Victoria finally looks up her cold gray eyes, scanning Emily from head to toe with obvious contempt. "I know exactly what you are. Some rich man's side piece, thinking she can waltz in here." Emily tries to step closer, clutching her stomach, as a wave of pain hits her. "My baby, I just need to sit down." "Get back." Victoria shoots up from her podium. "You don't get to cause a scene in my restaurant." Victoria's palm connects with Emily's cheek with vicious force. Emily's head snaps sideways, her body lurching backward. She crashes into a marble table, her pregnant belly taking the impact. She crumples to the floor, and blood begins pooling beneath her dress. The dining room falls silent. 100 wealthy guests freeze mid-bite. Security cameras capture everything. What Victoria doesn't know yet, she just made the biggest mistake of her life. The woman bleeding on her floor is Emily Salvatore, wife of Dominic the Silent Death. Salvatore, the most powerful mafia boss on the East Coast. And in his world, no one touches what belongs to the Don and lives to tell about it. If this satisfying made your satisfying heart race, satisfying smash that like button. Share it with someone who loves a good satisfying twist, and subscribe so you don't miss what happens. When the dawn walks through those doors, blood, dark red and hot, spreading from beneath Emily's dress, seeping into the cold marble floor. She lay there curled in on herself, both arms locked around her swollen belly, as if it were the last thing tethering her to life. The pain tore through her from the inside, so violent she could not draw a breath. Not this time. Please, not this time. The memory from 2 years ago crashed over her like a nightmare. The stark white hospital room, the doctor's voice saying, "I am so sorry," her hands empty when she walked out without a child. Emily ground her teeth, refusing to let fear swallow her whole. Not this time. She would not lose this baby. Her eyes swept the floor, searching. The phone she had tried to use to call Dominic before Victoria snatched it away and threw it to the ground. It lay less than a meter from her, the screen cracked, but still lit. Emily bit down on her lip, swallowed the groan rising in her throat, and began to drag herself toward it. Each centimeter was agony. The blood kept flowing. The pain kept ripping her apart from within. But Emily did not stop. Her fingers reached the phone, trembling as she unlocked it and pressed 911. Footsteps struck the floor, the sharp click of Victoria's high heels. Then a stomp, hard, merciless. The phone shattered beneath the bright red Louboutin heel. Emily lifted her head and looked up at Victoria looming over her like a predator standing on prey that was already dying. "No one calls from my restaurant." Victoria roared, her voice shrill. "Who do you think you are? You think you can cause trouble and then call the police here?" Emily stared straight into Victoria's eyes. No begging, no pleading, not a single tear. Her voice shook with pain, but every word landed clean sharp as a blade. "You can hurt me, but God sees everything. And there is someone else too. Victoria flinched, just for a second. Just a flicker of hesitation crossed those cold gray eyes. Then she buried it under her familiar cruelty, her mouth curling with contempt. God does not eat dinner at the Obsidian, you whore. Around them the restaurant seemed to freeze in time. 100 wealthy guests sat motionless, forks suspended in midair, wine glasses halted halfway to their lips. No one spoke, no one moved. A middle-aged man in a Tom Ford suit set his napkin down as if he meant to stand. His wife, a blonde woman wearing a diamond necklace, grabbed his arm, her bright red nails digging into the fabric. "Do not. It is not our business." The man looked down at Emily, his eyes full of pity and full of fear. Then he sat back down, turned his face away, and pretended he saw nothing. Emily did not blame him. She understood. She understood fear. She understood what it meant to protect your family. She had lived in fear for 3 hellish years before Dominic found her. "I understand," Emily whispered so softly, only she could hear. "You have a family to protect." A brutal contraction tore through her abdomen. Emily clenched her jaw, forced the cry back down. Her hands tightened around her belly, feeling a faint movement inside. The baby girl was still kicking. The baby girl was still fighting. "Hold on, my love," Emily whispered to the child within her, her voice barely more than breath. "Daddy is coming. He will come. He always comes." She closed her eyes, focusing on each fragile kick from her daughter inside her, on the warmth spilling from her body, on the sound of her own heartbeat slowing. Dominic would come. She knew it as surely as she knew the sun would rise. She only had to hold on, only had to survive. She had done that through 3 years in hell. She could do it for a few more minutes. Even lying on the floor, blood spreading beneath her, surrounded by indifferent strangers and one vicious woman, Emily Carter refused to beg. She had survived 3 years of hell. She would survive tonight. She only had to hold on. 3 seconds. Victoria Sterling stood frozen for exactly 3 seconds as she stared at the widening pool of blood at the feet of the pregnant woman. Her heart hammered wildly in her chest. This was the first time there had been blood, the first time things had gone this far. But then, like a machine, following its programming, Victoria drew a long breath and forced herself back into calm. 18 years in this business had taught her how to handle every scandal, every complication, every troublesome person. Control, always control. That was the only way to survive in this world. 25 years ago, Victoria herself had once been a young girl standing there trembling at the reception counter of an upscale restaurant, eyes full of hope. Hands gripping her job application folder so tightly her knuckles ached. The manager back then, a heavy-set man with a garish gold ring, had looked her up and down and sneered. "Girls from the Bronx do not belong in fine dining. Go back to your trailer park." She had cried all night after that. Then she wiped her tears, clenched her fists, and swore no one would ever look at her that way again. If she could not be respected, she would make people afraid. If she could not be loved, she would make them obey. Victoria climbed every rung with claws and venom by becoming exactly the kind of monster she had once been terrified of. And now, standing in the most luxurious restaurant in Manhattan, with a woman bleeding at her feet, Victoria knew precisely what she had to do. "Brandon." Her voice sliced through the air like a blade. The head waiter hurried over at once, his face drained pale. Drag this one out through the back door, right now, before anyone calls the police. Brandon hesitated for a second, glancing down at Emily curled on the floor. But she is bleeding, Miss Sterling. Maybe we should... I said, drag her out, Victoria hissed through clenched teeth. Do you want to keep your job, or do you want to be homeless next week? Brandon swallowed, then signaled to another employee to help. The two men grabbed Emily by the arms and began hauling her toward the back exit. Emily screamed the sound of her pain, ripping through the air, echoing across the dining room. But Victoria had already turned away, walking toward the guests with the most flawless professional smile she could summon. Ladies and gentlemen, I sincerely apologize for this disruption. Her voice was sweet as honey, steady as if nothing had happened. This woman attempted to steal from one of our guests. We are handling the situation. Please continue enjoying your dinner. Some of the guests nodded, their expressions loosening with relief. Victoria Sterling, 18 years of reputation. If she said that woman was a thief, then she must be a thief. They turned back to their Wagyu steaks, and Bordeaux erasing the image of a pregnant woman, bleeding on the floor as if they had never seen it at all. At that moment, the kitchen door flew open. Marcus Chen, the sous chef, burst out with panic written across his face. He had heard the screams, the commotion, and when he saw the streak of blood smeared across the floor leading toward the back door, his complexion went white. Victoria, she is losing so much blood. We need to call an ambulance, right? Victoria snapped around, her gray eyes cold as ice as they bored into Marcus. She stepped close, her voice dropping into a dangerous hissing whisper. Say one more word and you are fired on the spot. Think about your wife, your 2 children, your mortgage. Marcus went rigid. His fists clenched until his knuckles whitened. He thought of Lily, his wife, pregnant with their 3rd child. He thought of the 2 little ones asleep at home. He thought of the house they had only just managed to buy after years of saving. He did not say another word, but his eyes stored everything, the place, the time, every word Victoria said, every drop of blood on the floor. Victoria turned to the staff huddled in the corner, every face ashen. If anyone asks, she said slowly, pressing each word down like a stamp, she fell on her own. She was drunk and aggressive. She attacked me first. I only defended myself. Everyone saw it. Right. Silence. Then frightened nods one after another. 1, 2, 3. All of them nodding like puppets pulled by invisible strings. Victoria smiled. This was not the first time. And it would not be the last. No one remembers the nameless. No one cares about people without a voice. She had done this dozens of times to dozens of different people. And every time she got away with it. Because in this world, the one with power always wins. And Victoria Sterling had power. Victoria Sterling had become the monster she once feared. And like every monster she had forgotten she had ever been human. In the shadowed corner of the restaurant, where the warm golden lights could not reach Rosa Mendez, stood perfectly still with a mop in her hands. 52 years old, gray hair twisted into a neat bun at the nape of her neck, a faded gray apron worn thin from being washed too many times. She had been standing there from the very beginning. She had seen everything, from the moment the pregnant woman walked in her face, exhausted yet still full of hope, to the moment Victoria Sterling opened her mouth to humiliate her, to the slap, the impact, the pool of blood. And through it all, the phone tucked into Rosa's apron pocket had been quietly recording every second. 15 years. 15 years Rosa had worked at the obsidian, mopping floors, clearing tables, scrubbing toilets, doing every job no one else wanted to do. 15 years of watching Victoria Sterling destroy people. The young waitress fired for being too pretty, distracting the guests. The old man shamed in front of the entire dining room for wearing shoes not good enough. The pregnant hostess berated until she sobbed and quit on the spot. How many had there been? Rosa could not count. And what had she done? Nothing. She stayed silent. She kept her head down. She kept mopping as if she saw nothing, heard nothing. Because she was afraid. At home she had a single mother-daughter, struggling to raise 2 small grandchildren. Rosa's janitor wages were the main income for the whole family. Losing her job meant they all suffered, so she stayed quiet, year after year. But tonight, Rosa looked toward the back door where Brandon and another worker were dragging the pregnant woman along the floor. Blood left a long streak across the marble. The cries of pain echoed back. A pregnant woman, bleeding on the floor, while Victoria stood smiling at the guests as if nothing had happened. This was enough. Rosa's grandmother used to say evil wins when good people stay silent. She had been silent for 15 years. She had let evil win for 15 years. Not one more day. Rosa stopped recording. She had enough evidence. Slowly, as if she were only going to take out the trash, she slipped into the staff room in back. Her heart pounded hard against her ribs, but her hands did not shake as she pressed 911. There is a pregnant woman bleeding at the Obsidian restaurant. Rosa's voice was a whisper, but it was clear. She has been assaulted. Please come quickly. She ended the call, then carefully placed the phone at the very bottom of her personal locker beneath an old coat and a spare pair of shoes. Safe. The truth was safe. Rosa returned to the main room, took up her mop again, and went back to her work as if nothing had happened. She moved slowly toward the back door where Emily was being held. Mop the floor, watch, remember. No one looked at her. No one noticed her. To Victoria Sterling and those polished, wealthy diners, Rosa Mendez did not exist. She was only a shadow, a piece of furniture, part of the wall. And that was exactly her advantage. I am nobody, Rosa told herself, her eyes never leaving Emily's form at the back doorway. But even a nobody can do something. Even a nobody can speak the truth. Rosa Mendez had no power, no money, no connections. But she had something more precious than all of it. She had the courage to act when everyone else turned away. And a phone filled to the brim with truth. The 50th floor, a penthouse overlooking the Manhattan skyline. Through the floor to ceiling reinforced glass, the entire city spread beneath them like a carpet of glittering lights. But no one in this room was watching the view. Every gaze was fixed on the man seated at the head of the table, Dominic Salvatore. 1.88 meters tall, shoulders broad as a plank. The build of a man who had trained in boxing since he was a boy. Black hair lightly touched with silver at the temples, slicked back to perfect order. Eyes a blue-gray like the sea before a storm makes landfall cold and unreadable. On his left cheek, a faint scar ran from the cheekbone down close to the jaw, a keepsake from when he was 19, the first time he killed a man. A perfectly tailored black 3-piece suit, a Patek Philippe on his wrist. Everything understated, yet each piece worth more than an entire year of Victoria Sterling's salary. 5 capos sat around the table, representing 5 territories under the control of the Salvatore family: Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Staten Island, and part of New Jersey. They were discussing a new rival, a crew out of Philadelphia, trying to push into their territory. Voices traded back and forth, arguments, proposals. But every time Dominic spoke, even if it was only a single word, the entire room fell silent, as if someone had pulled all the air out of it. That was a kind of power that did not need to show off, did not need to shout, did not need to threaten. It only needed to exist. The phone in Dominic's suit pocket vibrated. He glanced down at the screen. Emily. Something in his chest warmed just a little. His wife rarely called during a meeting. She knew the rule. But she also knew that if she called, he would always answer. Dominic lifted one hand, signaling the capos to stop. The room went silent at once. He picked up. Emily. It was not his wife's voice that came back. It was noise, screaming, chaos. Then a woman's shrill voice rang out clearly through the line. "No one calls from my restaurant." A heavy impact, as if the phone had been snatched away. Then Emily's voice, weak broken, with pain choking on itself. "Dom!" The signal cut. Dominic stared at his phone screen. Call ended. He called back. Ringing. No answer. He called again. No answer. A third time. "The number you have dialed cannot be reached." The air in the room changed in an instant. The capos recognized it immediately. They had been around Dominic long enough to know when the atmosphere shifted from dangerous to lethal. And this was that moment. Dominic stood up, slowly. His face might have been carved from stone. Not a trace of emotion showed on the surface, but those blue-gray eyes had turned the color of a storm. He dialed Vince's head of security. "Emily, the Obsidian Restaurant. Something is happening. Move now." Vince's voice came back calm and professional on the other end. "Our people are already moving, boss." Dominic ended the call and looked at the capos. "Meeting is over." No one dared question him. They began to rise, gathering their things. One capo, Tony Marinelli, who ran Brooklyn, hesitated for a second before asking boss, "How many men do you need?" Dominic met his eyes, all of them. The capos exchanged looks. This was the first time in 5 years that Don Salvatore had ordered a full mobilization. The last time it happened, 12 men had died in a single night. Not one of them had belonged to the Salvatore family. They nodded, then hurried out, each already pulling out a phone and starting to call their crews. Dominic stood alone in the vast room, the Manhattan skyline spread before him. The phone in his hand vibrated again. This time it was his father's number, Luca Salvatore, the former Don, the man who had built this empire from empty hands and the blood of enemies. News traveled fast in the family. "I heard Luca," said his voice old, but still sharp as steel. "What happened?" "Someone touched Emily at the Obsidian." Silence. 3 seconds that stretched like a century. Then Luca spoke, his tone so cold it could have frozen the entire room. "Then may God bless them, because you will not." Dominic tightened his grip around the phone. "I will call you back when it is done." He ended the call and strode toward the private elevator. Each footstep rang on the marble like a war drum. Dominic Salvatore had built an entire empire on fear and blood, but the fear he felt, now fear for his wife, for the unborn child, was something no power could control, and that fear was about to become someone else's nightmare. 5 black SUVs tore through the streets of Manhattan like a funeral procession chasing death itself. Armored Cadillac Escalade's windows, so dark no one could see through them. Engines roaring into the night. They moved at a reckless speed, slipping between lanes, ignoring every traffic law, as if such rules belonged to another world. Red lights. They did not stop. Red lights were for ordinary people. A patrol car was parked at the corner of 52nd Street. The officer inside lifted his head at the growl of engines, saw the line of black vehicles streak past like wind. He recognized the plates. Anyone in Manhattan knew who those plates belonged to. And everyone knew you did not ask, you did not see, you did not remember. The officer calmly turned away, took a sip of coffee, and pretended the convoy had never existed. That was the rule of survival in this city. Inside the lead vehicle, Dominic Salvatore sat in the back seat, silent as a stone statue. Not a word spoken, not a wasted movement, only those blue-gray eyes fixed on the window and hands clenched so hard his knuckles had gone white. Vince Romano sat in the front, his phone vibrating non-stop with updates from the men on the ground. He was Dominic's head of security, 40 years old, a former special operations soldier, and one of the few people allowed close to the dawn in moments like this. Boss Vince said, his voice low and professional. The ambulance has arrived at the restaurant. Dominic did not turn his head. Who called? An anonymous call from inside the restaurant. Dominic filed that away. Someone inside had called for help for his wife. Someone had dared to act while the others looked away. Whoever it was would be rewarded properly. But that could wait. What do we know? She was attacked, fell. She is bleeding. That is all we have. She is bleeding. Those two words drilled into Dominic's mind like a blade heated red hot. His Emily, his child, bleeding, the manager's name, Victoria Sterling, 18 years at the Obsidian. Dominic repeated the name in his head. Victoria Sterling. He would remember it. He would remember it until his last breath. Find out everything about her, everything: family, address, bank accounts, debts, secrets, every skeleton in her closet. I want it all. Already in motion, boss. The convoy turned onto the street where the Obsidian stood, and Dominic saw it. The restaurant rose out of the night, warm golden light, spilling from its broad windows, elegant and proud as it always was. But tonight something was different. An ambulance sat out front, red lights flashing and spinning, tearing through the darkness like a wound that would not heal. Dominic's heart tightened until it hurt. Emily. The whisper slipped from his mouth, carrying a fear he had not felt since he was a child. The vehicles stopped. Doors opened almost in unison. Dominic stepped out first. The perfectly cut black three-piece suit, polished Italian leather shoes, and storm-colored eyes that let not a single emotion escape. Behind him, 15 men in black suits climbed out of the other vehicles. They moved like a military unit, silent, efficient, lethal. It was as if darkness spread from them, swallowing the streetlights around them. A few pedestrians stopped, stared at the convoy, stared at the men in black, then quickly lowered their heads and walked faster. No one wanted to be a witness to what was about to happen. No one wanted to see. No one wanted to remember. That was how you survived in Manhattan. Dominic walked straight to the restaurant doors. He did not need anyone to open them for him. The heavy glass doors slid apart as if they too understood fear. The 15 men followed formation, tight footsteps soundless. The convoy had stopped, the doors had opened, and Hell walked into the Obsidian wearing a three-piece suit. The glass doors of the Obsidian burst open with a hard, violent sound. 15 men in black suits flooded in, like a black tide, swiftly taking every corner of the restaurant, every exit, every stretch of space that could be held. They did not speak a word. They did not need to. Their presence was a declaration clear enough. Panic rippled through the dining room. Forks clattered onto plates. A glass shattered. Chairs scraped back. A woman screamed. An elderly man sprang to his feet, then sat down immediately when he caught the gaze of one of the men in black. And then the murmuring began. Frightened whispers spread through the room like a tidal wave. Salvatore, that is Salvatore, dear God. The black convoy, Salvatore's people. It is over. Someone is finished. Dominic Salvatore entered last. He was not in a hurry. He did not run. He did not shout. He walked with the calm of a king inspecting his own kingdom. His blue-gray eyes swept the room like a predator searching for prey. And then he saw her, Emily. She lay on a stretcher near the entrance where the paramedics were preparing to take her out to the ambulance. The navy blue dress he had helped her choose. That morning the dress, she had said, made her feel beautiful, even with a 7-month belly, was now soaked in blood. Her face was pale as paper. Her lips cracked and dry, but her eyes were open, alert, still searching for him. The world around Dominic stopped existing. No restaurant, no guests, no men in black, no frightened murmurs, only Emily, only his wife lying there bloodied but alive. He moved to the stretcher and dropped to his knees on the cold floor, not caring about his expensive suit or his polished Italian shoes. His hand trembled as he touched Emily's cheek, feeling the red mark of a slap still stamped into her white skin. Emily. His voice caught rough and thick. I am here, Emily cried. Tears ran down her cheeks and fell onto his hand. But she was not crying from pain. She was crying from relief. She clutched her husband's hand as if it were the only lifeline left in open water. Dom, she is still kicking, she is still fighting. Our daughter is fighting. Dominic felt her small fingers tighten around his, felt life still moving through his wife, felt the fear slowly drain away, replaced by something else, relief and rage. That is right, my girls. He tried to smile, tried to keep his voice steady for her. You are both warriors. Keep fighting. Emily looked straight into his eyes, her voice weak but proud. Dom, I did not let them break me. I will not let them break her. I did not beg. I did not cry. I just held on. For you. For our baby. Dominic bent down and kissed his wife's forehead with a tenderness so soft that the people watching could not believe this was Dominic the Silent Death Salvatore. I know you did. You are the strongest person I have ever known. A paramedic stepped forward, urgency in his voice, though he still tried to be polite. Sir, we have to go now. Every second matters. Dominic nodded and rose, but before he let go of his wife's hand, he asked, his voice still gentle for Emily, yet something in those blue-gray eyes had changed. A cold spark, a promise of hell. Who did this to you? Emily did not speak. She only looked toward a corner of the room. Dominic followed his wife's gaze, and he saw her. Victoria Sterling stood in the corner, her back pressed to the wall, as if she were trying to make herself small. Her face white as a corpse, her eyes wide with terror, and in that moment she understood. Who in Manhattan did not know Dominic Salvatore's face? Who in Manhattan did not know the silent death? The man so feared that even the police looked away when his black convoy passed. And now Victoria Sterling finally understood. The whore she had just slapped, The cheap bitch she had just humiliated. The pregnant woman she had shoved to the floor until blood spread everywhere. She was the wife of Don Salvatore. Dominic turned, fully facing Victoria. There was no longer any gentleness meant for Emily in his eyes. They were ice, they were a grave, they were death walking slowly forward. He did not say a word. He did not need to. That stare was the sentence. The temperature in the room seemed to drop to freezing. No one dared breathe. No one dared move. Victoria's legs gave out. She could not stand. She collapsed onto the floor, shaking, tears beginning to spill down her cheeks. She finally understood. She had not only slapped a pregnant woman. She had not only humiliated a stranger. She had laid hands on the wife of the silent death. And in his world, that was a death sentence written in blood. Dominic turned back to Emily one last time before they took her away. He took his wife's hand, gripping it tight as if he could not bear to let go. "I need to handle a small matter here. You go to the hospital first. I will be right behind you." Emily looked at him, her eyes still wet with tears but shining with worry. Not worry for herself, worry for him, for his soul. She squeezed his hand, her voice weak but clear. "Dom, remember what kind of man you want to be." Dominic held her gaze for a long moment. She was always like this, even lying on a stretcher, covered in blood in pain. She was still thinking of him, still trying to pull him out of the darkness he had lived in all his life. He bent down and kissed the back of her hand with a tenderness that did not belong in a place like this. "I remember. But first I need to be the kind of man they fear." Emily was loaded into the ambulance. The doors shut. The siren wailed, then faded into the distance. Dominic stood there for a second, watching the vehicle until it disappeared around the corner. Then he turned back, and the gentleman who had kissed his wife's hand vanished completely. In his place stood Dominic Salvatore. Don Salvatore, the silent death. He walked slowly toward Victoria, each footstep ringing on the marble like a funeral drum. Victoria was still crumpled on the floor, shaking like a leaf in a storm. When she saw Dominic coming closer, she lifted her head, her face smeared with tears and mascara. "Please, Mr. Salvatore, I did not know. I swear I did not know who she was." Dominic stopped in front of her, looked down, and said nothing. 10 seconds passed, 20, 30. The silence stretched into torture, more frightening than any threat. Victoria felt as if the air were being drained from her lungs, as if death itself were tightening slowly around her throat. At last Dominic spoke. His voice was light as wind, so light it was terrifying. "You did not know." Victoria nodded frantically. "No, I swear, I did not know. If you had known, would you have treated her differently?" Victoria froze. She did not know how to answer. Say yes, and she would admit she feared power, not that she regretted what she had done. Say no, and she would be lying outright to a man who could smell a lie in the blink of her eyes. Or would you have been just as cruel, only more careful about it? Dominic did not wait for an answer. He already knew it. Vince stepped up beside him, his voice low and professional. "Boss," she also ordered the staff to drag the madam toward the back door. To cover up what she did, Dominic turned his head, looking toward the corner where Brandon stood cowering, his face gray, his legs trembling so badly he could barely stay upright. "You..." One word was enough to make Brandon look like he might faint on the spot. "You put your hands on my wife." Brandon broke into sobs, tears and snot pouring down his face. "She told me to. I was just following orders. I was just following orders, following orders. Dominic repeated the words slowly as if tasting disgust on his tongue. He said nothing else to Brandon, not yet. Instead, he turned back to Victoria. No warning, no sign of what was coming. Dominic seized Victoria's right hand and bent it back. 2 sharp cracks snapped through the deadly quiet. 2 fingers broken clean. Victoria screamed. The sound ripped through the night, echoed across the restaurant full of pain and terror. She collapsed, rolling on the floor, her right hand now twisted into something grotesque. The entire room held its breath. Many guests turned away, unable to look. A woman clapped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. A man squeezed his eyes shut and prayed under his breath. Dominic stood there calm as if he had done something as small as straighten a tie. That is for touching her face. He crouched, grabbed Victoria by the hair, hauled her up, and leaned close to her ear to whisper. His voice was soft as breath, but every word carried the weight of a death sentence. When I come back from the hospital, we will discuss what you called her, what you did to her, and what happens to people who dare touch what belongs to me. Dominic released her rose and adjusted his suit as if nothing had happened, as if he had not just broken a woman's fingers, as if it were as ordinary as breathing. He turned to Vince. No one leaves. Anyone runs, break their legs. Understood, boss. I will be back. Dominic walked away, passing Victoria on the floor in tears without even a glance. When he reached the door and climbed into the ambulance, waiting to take him to the hospital with Emily, that cold face finally showed a flicker of worry. His wife, his daughter. 20 minutes ago, Victoria Sterling had controlled this room. Now she lay on the floor with broken fingers, surrounded by men who would kill her with a single nod. The reversal was complete. The Queen had become a prisoner. The moment the door closed behind Dominic, Vince Romano took control. He stepped into the center of the room, eyes sharp as blades as they swept over every face, every shadowed corner, every entrance and exit. Listen up. Vince did not raise his voice, yet it carried through the dead silence. No one moves, no one makes a call, no one leaves this place. He snapped his fingers. At once, 5 men in black suits began circling the tables, collecting phones from guests and staff alike, dropping them into black bags. Not a single protest, not a flicker of resistance. Dominic's men stood at every door, every emergency exit, even the kitchen windows. The obsidian was completely sealed. A middle-aged man in an Armani suit shot to his feet, his face flushed with anger. "Do you know who I am? I am a senior partner at—" Vince turned and looked at him. Only looked, not a word. The man stopped mid-sentence. "Do you know who I work for?" Vince asked, his tone light as nothing. Silence. Vince stepped closer and stopped less than a single pace away. "Sit down. Stay quiet. You will be fine. Cause trouble and you will not be fine." The man sat immediately so fast his knees nearly buckled. The Armani suit meant nothing now. The senior partner title carried no weight now. In this room there was only one power, and that power stood in front of him in a black suit with calluses on his knuckles and the eyes of a man who had killed without losing sleep. Vince turned toward Brandon, still crumpled in the corner, face ashen legs, shaking so hard he looked ready to collapse. "You, come with me." Brandon sobbed and shook his head, but 2 men in black suits seized his arms and dragged him toward the staff room in back. Vince followed and shut the door. Outside, the others could only hear. Vince's voice low and cold. You dragged Mrs. Salvatore across the floor. Brandon's voice crying, pleading. She told me to do it. I had no choice. Victoria told me to do it. Vince's voice. There is always a choice. Then the sound of a punch, a scream, another punch, a weaker scream, the next punch. No scream, now only choking moans. Vince's voice continued calm, as if he were discussing the weather. The boss is at the hospital right now, worried about his wife and his unborn daughter. When he comes back, you had better have something useful to say. Every detail, every word Victoria said. All of it. Brandon again, his voice thick broken by pain and terror. I will tell everything, all of it, please, good. Now sit there and think about your choices. The door opened. Vince walked out, adjusting his shirt cuffs as if he had just finished an ordinary office task. Behind him, Brandon lay curled on the floor, his face swollen blood, running from his nose and lips crying without sound. At that moment, a man from the restaurant staff stepped forward. Marcus Chen, the sous chef. He stopped in front of Vince, back straight eyes full of worry. Sir, I need you to know something. Vince looked at him and waited. I wanted to help her. I wanted to call 911. But Victoria threatened my job, my family. Marcus drew a deep breath. I am not excusing myself. I should have done more. I was a coward. But I remember everything, every word, every action. If the boss needs a witness, I will tell the truth, the whole truth. Vince studied Marcus for a long moment, measuring him, weighing him, searching for a lie in the cook's eyes. He found none. You are honest. That is rare in this room. What is your name? Marcus Chen, sous chef. Vince nodded slowly. The boss will remember your name, Marcus Chen. In the corner, seated among the other staff, Rosa Mendez watched it all in silence. No one looked at her. No one noticed her. To them, she was part of the wall furniture heir. Her phone was still safe in her personal locker in the staff room. No one thought to check the locker of an old cleaning woman. No one imagined she could possess anything that mattered. Good Rosa told herself, let them forget I exist. The truth is safe. The Obsidian was no longer a restaurant. It was a prison. And Vince Romano was the warden, waiting for the judge to return. The ambulance tore into the emergency bay of Mount Sinai's private hospital wing, the kind reserved for people with enough money or enough power to be treated like royalty. And Dominic had called ahead. When the back doors swung open, Dr. Sarah Mitchell was already there with her nurses and a rolling gurney. She was Emily's private obstetrician, the one who had followed her pregnancy from the earliest weeks, and she was one of the few people Dominic trusted with his wife's life. Emily was brought out, her face pale as paper blood still soaking into her dress. Dominic climbed down after her, his expression hard as stone, but his eyes unable to hide what he feared. Dr. Mitchell checked Emily quickly, then ordered the team to rush her inside. She turned to Dominic, her tone grave but steady. Placental abruption, partial separation. The fetus is in critical condition. Dominic felt as if someone had driven a fist straight into his chest. We need an emergency cesarean, right now. Do whatever you have to do, Dominic rasped. Save them both. Dr. Mitchell nodded. I will do everything I can. She turned and moved fast toward the operating room, but before they could take Emily away, she grabbed Dominic's hand, gripping with a strength that felt impossible in her condition. Dom, wait. Dominic dropped to his knees beside the gurney, his face level with hers. I am here. I am here. Emily looked straight into his eyes, her voice weak, yet every word clear as crystal. Promise me one thing. If I do not make it, do not say that. Dominic cut in, his voice breaking. You will make it. Both of you will make it. Listen to me, please. Emily tightened her hold. Do not kill anyone because of me. Not tonight, not ever. I do not want our daughter to grow up knowing her father became a monster for revenge. I do not want her to inherit blood on his hands. Dominic said nothing. Rage churned inside him. The image of Victoria Sterling on her knees. Emily's scream of pain through the phone. The red slap mark on his wife's cheek. He wanted to kill that woman. He wanted to tear her apart. Emily, promise me, Dom. Promise me you will let the law handle it. Emily held his gaze, her eyes full of tears and full of strength. I survived 3 years in hell. I survived because I did not let them turn me into a monster. Do not let them turn you into a monster. Dominic closed his eyes, fighting, splintering. One part of him, the dark part, the part that had killed his first man when he was 19, was screaming for blood. But another part, the part Emily had thawed after so many years of ice, was pleading with him to hear her. I promise, he choked out. Emily gave him a faint smile, the first since tonight's nightmare began. That is my Dom. They took her into surgery. The doors shut. Dominic stood alone in the blinding white corridor, staring at the operating room lights glowing through the small window, and in that hush memory crashed down on him. 3 years earlier, an abandoned warehouse house on the outskirts of Brooklyn. Dominic had gone there to handle a human trafficker who owed the Salvatore family a large sum. He found the man, and he found more than that. Girls. Dozens of girls locked away in rooms as dark as hell. And in the corner of one room, a girl sat folded into herself, bones and angles, like a walking skeleton. Skin chalk pale, mapped with bruises and scars. Eyes dead empty without the smallest spark of life. Emily. She looked up when Dominic came in. No fear, no hope, nothing at all. Kill me, she said, her voice hoarse from disuse. Death would be better than this. Dominic stood there looking at her, and for the first time in the 33 years of his life, his frozen heart melted. Then live, he said. Live to prove them wrong. He held out his hand. She stared at it, hesitated, then took it. That was the first time Emily chose to live, and the first time Dominic chose to save instead of kill. Now 2 hours, 120 minutes, 7,200 seconds. Each one stretched out like a century. Dominic stood in the corridor with his back against the wall, his eyes never leaving that small window in the operating room door. Vince called to report what was happening at the Obsidian. Dominic answered with a single word. Wait. Then he ended the call. The operating room light went dark. The doors opened. Dr. Mitchell stepped out, her face, worn with exhaustion, but there was a smile on her lips. Dominic straightened, his heart pounding as if it might burst. They both survived, she said. Your little girl is small, but she is a fighter. She will need time in the neonatal intensive care unit, but she will be all right. Dominic felt his knees turn soft. He almost collapsed with relief. Your wife lost a lot of blood, but she is stable. She is asking for you. Thank you, Dr. Dominic's voice shook. Thank you. Dr. Mitchell's smile was tired. Thank your wife. She refused to quit. Even when her body wanted to surrender, her mind would not allow it. Dominic nodded. His wife. The strongest woman he had ever known. She had survived 3 years in hell. She had survived tonight. And she had made him promise. He remembered that promise. Do not kill anyone. Yet the anger still boiled in his veins, demanding to be answered. He had promised not to kill. He had not promised not to destroy. His wife was safe. His daughter would live. Dominic had kept his word. He would not kill Victoria Sterling. But there were things worse than death, and he knew every one of them. 3 a.m. The doors of the obsidian opened again. Dominic Salvatore walked in, and it was as if the air had been pulled from the room. He was still wearing the same black 3-piece suit from the beginning of the night, but now there were streaks of blood on it. Emily's blood, dried into a brown-red stain against the black cloth like a silent indictment. He had not changed on purpose. He wanted everyone in the room to see it. He wanted them to understand. He wanted Victoria Sterling to understand what she had caused. No one dared breathe too hard. No one dared move. For hours they had sat here in fear, guarded by men in black suits, with eyes that promised death. And now the judge had returned. Dominic walked slowly through the room, each footstep sounding on the marble like a funeral drum. He stopped at the center, where a chair had been placed for him, and sat down. Not sat. He took his place, like a king on a throne, like a judge on the bench, like death itself preparing to pronounce sentence. Vince stepped to his side and bent close to speak in a low voice. Everything has been recorded. Multiple witnesses are ready to testify. Brandon confessed to all of it. Dominic nodded slowly. Bring her here. 2 men in black suits moved toward the corner where Victoria Sterling had been crouched on the floor for hours. They seized her arms, hauled her up, and dragged her forward to Dominic. Victoria fell to her knees in front of him. Her right hand had been wrapped crudely with a restaurant napkin, 2 broken fingers swollen beneath it. Her face was smeared with mascara, puffed from crying. Her blonde hair was limp, clinging from sweat and tears. There was nothing left of the powerful woman who had stood behind the host stand earlier that night, wearing that contemptuous smile and those eyes cold as ice. 25 years. 25 years building myself from nothing. Victoria thought he'd bowed, unable to look up. I swore no one would ever look down on me again. I became hard. I became ruthless. I became powerful. And now I am kneeling before a man who could end me with a single whisper. Was it worth it? All those years of hurting people just to feel strong. All the lives I stepped on to climb higher. In the end, I am still just that frightened girl from the Bronx. I am only better at hiding it. Victoria lifted her head, trying to gather the last scraps of control she had left. Mr. Salvatore, this was a misunderstanding. I did not recognize her. If I had known, Dominic raised one finger, just one. And Victoria went silent, as if someone had closed a hand around her throat. If you had known what? Dominic's voice was light as a passing breeze, yet in that softness lay the weight of stone. That she was my wife. Victoria swallowed, afraid to answer. If you had known, would you have treated her kindly? Silence. Or would you have been just as cruel, only more careful? Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no answer. Or rather, she had an answer, but she did not dare speak it. Because the truth was that if she had known Emily was Dominic Salvatore's wife, she would have bowed low to serve her. She would have smiled. She would have led Emily to the best table in the house. Not because she was kind, but because she was afraid. And that was exactly what Dominic was saying. He did not add anything else. He only looked at Victoria, silent. 10 seconds, 20, 30. The silence stretched into torture, heavier than any threat. In that silence, Victoria heard the echo of herself. Every cruel word she had ever spoken. Every person she had humiliated. Every shred of dignity she had stolen. The young waitress fired for being too pretty. The old man shamed over shoes that were not expensive enough. The pregnant hostess screamed at until she broke down sobbing and quit. And now Emily Salvatore, the pregnant woman she had called a cheap whore, the woman she had slapped, the woman she had shoved to the floor until blood flooded the marble. Tears slid down Victoria's cheeks. Not tears of remorse, tears of fear. The tears of someone who had finally realized that everything she did carried a price, and tonight she would pay. In Dominic's silence, Victoria heard the echo of every cruel thing she had ever said, every person she had shamed, every dignity she had taken, and she understood that this was karma, wearing a blood-stained three-piece suit. Dominic sat still for a long time, letting the silence torment Victoria a few seconds more, and then he finally spoke. "I want to hear what happened, from your mouth, your version." Victoria lifted her head, a thin, fragile spark of hope flashing in her reddened eyes. Maybe, just maybe, if she told it the right way, if she made herself sound like the victim. She came in without a proper reservation. Victoria began, her voice trembling as she tried to keep it convincing. She was aggressive, demanding. I tried to explain politely, but she started yelling. She grabbed my hand. I only pushed her away to defend myself. She fell. It was an accident. From the corner of the room, Brandon spoke up, his voice shrill with fear and pain, his face still swollen from Vince's interrogation. Yes, that is what happened. That woman was very aggressive. Miss Victoria had no other choice. I saw everything. Dominic nodded slowly, a nod no one could read. No one knew what he was thinking. No one knew whether he believed it or not. "Interesting story," he said. "Does anyone have a different version?" Silence. No one dared speak. The guests stared down at their cold food. The staff stared down at the floor. No one wanted to be involved. No one wanted to become the next target. And then, from the darkest corner of the room, where no one paid attention, a woman stood up. Rosa Mendez, 52 years old, a faded gray janitor uniform, a phone in her hand. "I do, sir." Every eye in the room snapped to her. Victoria whipped around, eyes wide with shock. "You, the cleaning woman, you can." Rosa stepped out of the shadows and walked straight toward Dominic, with a calm that felt impossible for someone facing the most powerful mafia boss on the East Coast. She stopped in front of Victoria and looked directly into the eyes of the woman who had been her boss for 15 years. Yes, the cleaning woman, the one you never notice, the one you have treated like furniture for 15 years. Rosa said, her voice, even but each word heavy with truth. "I have watched you destroy people, Victoria, for 15 years. I did not have the power to stop you." Rosa raised the phone. "But tonight, I have this. You forgot something important. Invisible people still have eyes, and phones, and the ability to call 911. Victoria went pale. "No, that cannot be." Dominic signaled to Vince. Vince took the phone from Rosa's hand and connected it to the large flat screen mounted on the restaurant wall, the one usually used for specials and advertising. Tonight it would show something else. The video began to play. The picture was clear, the sound sharp. Emily walked into the restaurant, one hand resting on her pregnant belly, her face tired but still polite. Victoria stood behind the host's stand, her eyes raking Emily from head to toe, with open contempt. "Cheap whores like you do not belong here." Victoria's voice rang out from the screen. Emily tried to explain, her voice gentle, courteous. "Please, I have a reservation. My husband—" "Do not lie to me," Victoria snapped. Then the slap, hard, merciless. No one grabbed anyone's hand. No one screamed aggressively. Emily fell, hit the table. Blood began to flow, and Victoria stood there, ordering Brandon to drag Emily out the back door. If anyone asks, that one fell on her own. She was drunk and aggressive. She attacked me first. Everyone saw it, right? The video stopped. The entire room was silent as paper. Victoria shook her face, white as a corpse. "That video is fake. This woman manipulated it." "She is lying," Rosa answered calmly. "The timestamp is there, the audio is clear, and I am certain the restaurant's security cameras recorded the same thing." Dominic stood, slowly, calmly, as if everything unfolding had been part of his plan. "Speaking of security cameras," he said, his voice light as wind, "the cameras in this restaurant also recorded everything. Every angle, every word. How do I know?" He paused, letting the question hang in the air. "Because this is my restaurant." Victoria froze. Shock piled on shock. Her eyes widened so far they looked as if they might pop. "I own this building, this restaurant, through a holding company you have never heard of." Dominic stepped closer, looking down at her with something that was almost pity. "Almost. You have worked for me for 18 years, Victoria, and you never knew. But I knew about you. I just never cared enough to look closely. Until tonight." Victoria collapsed completely, strength draining out of her body. "His restaurant. For 18 years I have been working for him. Everything I built, everything I thought was mine was his." She broke into sobs, no longer able to defend herself, no longer having anything to say. Victoria Sterling had spent 18 years believing she was the queen of the Obsidian. She had just learned she was only an employee who had made a fatal mistake by hurting the owner's wife. Dominic turned and looked across the room, his gaze cutting through every face like a blade. "Now, I want to know everyone who helped her, everyone who laid hands on my wife, everyone who saw it and did nothing." A heavy silence fell. No one dared move. No one dared breathe too hard. Dominic nodded toward Brandon. Two men in black suits immediately dragged him from the corner where he had been curled up for hours and threw him onto the floor in front of Dominic. Brandon's face was swollen, one eye bruised dark. His lips split and still leaking blood from Vince's interrogation. He looked like a wounded animal shaking desperate. "You," Dominic said, looking down at him, "you dragged my wife while she was bleeding across the floor." Brandon broke into sobs, tears, and snot running down his face. "I was just following orders. Victoria told me to do it. I had no choice." Dominic tilted his head slightly as if weighing that excuse. Then he spoke, his voice cold as ice. "You had a choice. You chose wrong." He signaled to Vince. Two men seized Brandon and dragged him toward the staff room and back. "No, please, I am sorry. I am sorry." Brandon's screams echoed through the restaurant, the door shut. Then the screaming continued, muffled, ragged, full of pain and terror. No one in the room dared ask what was happening. No one wanted to know. Dominic turned to the remaining staff. Who else? Who helped her cover it up? A young waitress stepped forward, her face drained, her voice trembling. "She told us to say the woman was drunk and aggressive." A busboy stood up, head bowed. "She said if we opened our mouths, we would never find work in this city again." A hostess sobbed openly. I wanted to help, but I was so scared. I am sorry. I am truly sorry. Dominic listened without expression, and then Marcus Chen stepped forward. He walked straight up to Dominic, shoulders squared, his face worried but firm. Mr. Salvatore, I need to confess something. Dominic watched him waiting. I could have stopped this sooner, not just tonight, but years ago. Marcus drew a deep breath. Victoria has done this before. Maybe not this bad, but she has humiliated customers, bullied employees, ruined careers for petty reasons. I knew. All of us knew. And we stayed silent because we were afraid. Tonight, your wife nearly died because of our collective silence. Marcus met Dominic's eyes without flinching. I wanted to call 911 when I saw her bleeding. Victoria threatened my job, my family, and I backed down. I am not asking for forgiveness. I do not deserve forgiveness. I am only asking make sure this never happens again. To anyone. Dominic studied Marcus for a long moment, silent, measuring. And then for the first time that night, something shifted in his eyes. Not forgiveness, but not contempt either. You are the only one in this room who is not making excuses. The only one taking responsibility. What is your name? Marcus Chen. Dominic nodded slowly. I will remember that name, Marcus Chen, for reasons different from the rest. Rosa Mendez stepped up beside Marcus. She placed one hand on his shoulder, her eyes steady on Dominic. He is telling the truth. He tried to help. Victoria stopped him. She paused for a beat. But I want to add something. For 15 years, I watched Victoria hurt people, staff, guests, anyone she believed was beneath her. I stayed silent because I was afraid too. All of us were afraid, but tonight was different. Tonight I could not look away anymore. A pregnant woman, bleeding on the floor. While Victoria planned the cover-up, Rosa lifted her chin, her voice clear and strong. I am nobody, but even a nobody can choose to do the right thing. Dominic looked at Rosa and Marcus, two people. Victoria Sterling had treated, like air, two people she had judged meaningless by her own measure. The chef who chose truth over safety, and the janitor who chose courage over fear. Marcus Chen and Rosa Mendez. The two people Victoria had dismissed as insignificant had just decided her fate. Sometimes the smallest voices carry the largest truths. Dominic rose from the chair at the center of the room, slowly, calmly, as if he held all the time in the world. He walked to Victoria each step, ringing across the marble like a bell for the dead. Victoria was still collapsed on her knees, her right hand crudely wrapped, two broken fingers swollen beneath the bandage. Her face streaked with tears, and mascara shaking like a leaf in a storm. Dominic stopped in front of her and looked down with an expression no one could read. In my world, laying hands on the Don's wife means death. No trial, no lawyer, no appeal. His hand slipped inside his suit jacket and came out holding a gun. A black Beretta, cold metal catching the restaurant's golden light. Dominic pressed the barrel to Victoria's forehead. Cold, hard, final. Victoria trembled, tears pouring down her face, but she did not even have the strength to cry aloud anymore. Her lips moved, only broken pleas coming out. Please, please. The entire room stopped breathing. No one dared move. No one dared make a sound. The VIP guests covered their eyes, unable to watch. The staff cried silently with hands over their mouths. Rosa Mendez clenched her fists until her knuckles went white, her heart pounding like war drums in her chest. Dominic's finger rested on the trigger. 1 centimeter, just one more centimeter, and Victoria Sterling would no longer exist in this world. And then he stopped. "My wife made me promise one thing tonight," Dominic said into the deadly quiet. "Before the surgery, when she did not know whether she would live or die, she said, 'Do not kill anyone because of me. Do not become a monster for revenge.' She said, 'If you kill out of hatred, you are no different from the ones who hurt me.'" Dominic looked down at Victoria, and for the first time, something other than hatred surfaced in his eyes. "Do you know what my wife survived before I ever met her? 3 years, 3 years in hell. Traffickers, abusers, men who treated her as if she was not human. And after all of that, she still believes in mercy. She still believes revenge does not heal wounds. Only justice does. I do not understand it. But I love her, and I respect her." Dominic lowered the gun. Victoria nearly crumpled from relief, a sob tearing out of her throat. "You should thank her, Victoria. My wife, the woman you called a cheap whore, the woman you slapped, the woman you planned to throw out into the street like trash, just saved your worthless life." Victoria bowed low to the floor, sobbing. Thank you, sir." Dominic looked down at her with cold contempt. "Do not thank me. I would have pulled the trigger if it were not for her. Thank Emily. Pray for Emily. Because she is the only reason you are still breathing." Victoria sobbed, thinking the nightmare was over, but she was wrong. However, Dominic continued, his voice cold as ice. "I promised I would not kill you. I never promised you would live in peace." He slid the gun back into his suit and began to circle Victoria like a panther playing with prey. "The law will judge you. You will go to prison. And when you get out, 8 years, 10 years, however long it takes, you will find nothing waiting for you. I own this city in ways the law cannot touch. Every landlord knows my name. Every business owner, every bank, every company. When you get out, you will never rent an apartment in this city again. You will never find a job. You will never open a bank account. You will live the rest of your life the way you treated others, as if you do not exist, as if you are nobody." Dominic stopped in front of her and looked down one last time. "Death would be mercy. What I am giving you is a lifetime of living like an invisible person." Victoria understood. He was not killing me, he was erasing me. Prison would end. What came after would never end. Dominic turned away and began to walk. Then he stopped and spoke over his shoulder without looking back. "And if you ever speak my wife's name again, or even think about her," he paused. He did not finish the sentence. The silence hung in the air, more terrifying than any threat that could have been spoken. Dominic Salvatore kept his promise to Emily. He did not kill Victoria Sterling. Instead, he gave her something far worse. A future where she would live like a ghost, unseen and forgotten, exactly the way she had made others feel. Sometimes mercy is the most brutal punishment of all. 4 in the morning. Blue and red lights flashed beyond the glass of the obsidian. The police had finally arrived. Detective James Morrison entered first, followed by 4 uniformed officers. He was a man in his 40s, salt and pepper hair, a hard carved face that belonged to someone who had seen far too much in one lifetime, and he knew exactly whose den he was walking into. Morrison's eyes swept the room. The VIP guests were hunched together in a corner. Faces drained pale with fear and exhaustion after hours of being held in place. The restaurant staff were clustered in another corner, many of them still wearing tear tracks on their cheeks. Victoria Sterling knelt on the floor, her hand crudely wrapped her face, swollen mascara smeared. And Brandon Wells just brought out. From the back room stood bruised and battered one eye so swollen it was almost shut, limping, as if each step were torture. Morrison did not ask about Brandon. He had lived in this city long enough to know which questions should never be spoken out loud. Dominic Salvatore rose from the chair at the center of the room and walked to Morrison with the calm of a man welcoming someone into his own home, because in essence it was exactly that. Mr. Salvatore Morrison said, his tone neutral and professional. "We received a report of an assault." Dominic nodded and shook Morrison's hand with perfect courtesy. "Detective, the victim is my wife. She is at the hospital, recovering from emergency surgery." He gestured toward Victoria. "The perpetrator is over there." Then he handed Morrison a USB drive. "The evidence is here. Video from the restaurant security cameras and video from a witness." Finally, he indicated the staff. "The witnesses are ready to give statements." Morrison took the USB drive and nodded slowly. He turned to the young officer with him and spoke quietly but clearly enough. "We arrest that woman. We log the evidence. We do not ask anything else about what happened tonight." The young officer looked toward Brandon, his face covered in bruises and swelling that clearly did not come from falling downstairs. "But sir, that man looks like he—" "I said we do not ask." Morrison cut in, his voice firm. The young officer closed his mouth and nodded. Two officers walked to Victoria, pulled her to her feet, and cuffed her hands behind her back. "Victoria Sterling, you are under arrest for aggravated assault causing serious injury, endangering an unborn child, and obstruction of justice." Victoria did not resist. She no longer had the strength for anything. She simply let herself be led away, like a puppet with its strings cut. Brandon was cuffed as well. Brandon Wells. "You are under arrest as an accomplice and for obstruction of emergency services." Brandon limped after the police, his face swollen, but there was a strange flicker of relief in his eyes. Maybe prison was safer than being outside with the Salvatore family. As Victoria was led past where Rosa stood, the older cleaning woman stepped forward one pace and spoke softly, only loud enough for Victoria to hear. "I hope that one day you find peace, Victoria. But first you need to face what you did. All of it." Victoria looked at Rosa, the woman she had never once truly noticed in 15 years. The woman she had treated like air, like furniture, like someone who did not exist, and she could not say a word, not one. Before leaving, Morrison turned back to Dominic. "Mr. Salvatore, your wife, I hope she makes a full recovery." Dominic nodded. "She will be all right. She is the strongest person I know." Morrison nodded once more, then led his officers out of the restaurant. Not a single question about Victoria's broken fingers. Not a single question about Brandon's bruised face. Not a single question about the men in black suits, still standing motionless at every corner. In this world, there are questions no one wants to hear the answers to. Justice began that night not with the power of a Mafia don, but with the courage of an older cleaning woman and a phone full of truth. The law would handle the rest, and Dominic Salvatore would make sure it did. 48 hours after that fateful night, the video was leaked online from an anonymous source, and no one could say for certain who uploaded it, though many suspected it was part of Dominic Salvatore's plan to make sure Victoria Sterling had no way out. Headlines flooded news sites everywhere declaring that a restaurant manager harmed a pregnant woman without realizing she was the wife of a mafia boss, and the story spread like wildfire. 100 million views in the first 72 hours. Short clips were cut and reposted across TikTok, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook until every platform felt like it was on fire, until everyone was talking at once. The hashtag Justice for Emily trended worldwide within hours, but another hashtag was climbing just as fast: Invisible Heroes. Someone had identified Rosa Mendez, the woman who filmed it, the woman who called 911, the 52-year-old cleaning woman with silver hair and hands, roughened by 15 years of scrubbing floors. And overnight she became a symbol. The invisible person changed everything. Read the first headline written about her, and from there the storm did not slow. The media began digging into Victoria Sterling's past, and what they found was far worse than what happened that night. More than 50 complaints filed by former employees over the past 18 years, all buried or ignored. A former server appeared on television with reddened eyes and said that Victoria made her cry every shift until she quit, and that it took 3 years of therapy to recover after leaving. A former busboy shared his story online and said that Victoria called him an anchor baby because his parents were immigrants in front of customers, in front of coworkers, and no one said a word. A former hostess spoke on a podcast and said that Victoria told her she was too ugly for fine dining, that her face ruined people's appetites. A pattern sharpened into focus. Victoria Sterling targeted the people she decided were beneath her: immigrants, working people, anyone without the power to fight back. And for 18 years, she ruled a small kingdom like a tyrant, while everyone else learned the same lesson: stay quiet and survive. Until Rosa. Reporters descended on Rosa's small Brooklyn apartment, lining up outside, cameras pointed at her face as she stepped into the doorway, and someone called out that people were calling her a hero. Rosa paused and looked into the lens with calm, steady eyes, and said she was not a hero, only someone who could not look away anymore. She drew a breath and admitted that for 15 years she saw things and did nothing. 15 years of guilt, and that on that night she decided there would not be one more, that even if she lost her job, she could not live with herself if she stayed silent again. She looked straight into the camera and said that anyone could be a hero. You only had to choose to see the people others ignored, and that line went viral. Seeking the Invisible became a new hashtag, honoring invisible workers across America. The cleaners, the dishwashers, the security guards, the people society often treats as if they do not exist. Record and Report became another movement urging people to document and report the injustices they witness. Restaurants, hotels, and businesses across the country began re-examining policies for how they treat employees and customers, and many posted signs at their entrances that said every customer deserves respect, and every employee deserves to be treated with basic decency. The Obsidian closed temporarily to restructure the notice taped to the front door, announcing new management, new policies, new values. And no one knew when it would reopen, and maybe not many people cared. The video did not go viral because the wife of a mafia boss was attacked. It went viral because an older cleaning woman proved that ordinary people can force the powerful to be held accountable. Rosa Mendez had no army, no money, no connections. She had a phone and a conscience, and she changed everything. 3 months later, the New York courthouse was packed shoulder to shoulder with reporters and cameras. The case had become a national fixation, not only because of who the victim was, but because of what it had come to represent: the arrogance of the powerful, the silence of the witnesses, and the courage of an older cleaning woman who dared to speak. Victoria Sterling stood at the defendant's table, and almost no one recognized the woman who had ruled the Obsidian for 18 years. Her hair had gone noticeably gray, no longer dyed, and carefully maintained the way it used to be. Her face was thinner cheekbones, jutting sharp beneath tight skin. Her eyes were sunken, heavy bruised shadows hanging beneath them. 3 months in pretrial detention had stripped away every mask she had built over 25 years. Victoria's lawyer was a public defender. She no longer had money for a private attorney. Her accounts were frozen, her assets seized, her apartment taken. The invisible hand of Salvatore had reached into every corner of her life, quiet and relentless. The public defender did what he could, but the evidence was too clear. There was nothing to argue. Rosa Mendez was called to the stand. She told the court about 15 years of watching Victoria destroy people detail by detail, victim by victim, cruel word by cruel word. The video was played again in open court, and the courtroom fell so still it seemed to stop breathing as everyone watched. The slap, heard the scream, saw the blood. Marcus Chen testified next. He spoke about Victoria threatening to fire anyone who tried to help Emily, about the fear that had kept him and the rest of the staff silent, about the regret he would carry for the rest of his life. Dozens of other former employees were called. They described a pattern of discrimination that stretched back for years: the insults, the arbitrary firings, the tears shed in the break room. Dr. Sarah Mitchell testified about Emily's medical condition: the placental abruption, the severe blood loss, the emergency surgery. The baby Sophia delivered 2 months early because of the trauma, Emily nearly dying, the baby nearly dying. All of it born from a slap and a cruel indifference. Emily did not appear in court. At her request, she did not want to face Victoria, but her written statement was read aloud. "I do not want revenge. I want accountability. I want no other woman to go through what I went through." Before sentencing, Victoria was allowed a final statement. She rose slowly, exhausted. No longer the arrogant woman who once stood behind the Obsidian host stand with a contemptuous smile. Only a broken woman who had finally been forced to see herself. 25 years ago, someone told me I did not belong in fine dining because of where I came from. Victoria said, her voice trembling but clear. A manager looked at me, a young girl from the Bronx, and said, "Girls like you are only good for wiping tables, not managing restaurants." I spent my entire life proving them wrong, climbing, fighting, becoming someone they could not ignore. But somewhere along the way, I became them. I became someone who judged others by appearances. Someone who decided who belonged and who did not. Someone who used power to hurt instead of help. I hurt the people who reminded me of the girl I used to be, because seeing them reminded me of my own shame. That is not an excuse. There is no excuse for what I did. Victoria turned toward the gallery, even though Emily was not there. To Emily Salvatore, I am sorry, not because of who your husband is, but because you came into my restaurant in pain, asking to be treated with decency, and I gave you cruelty. You deserved better. Everyone I hurt deserved better. Victoria turned to Rosa, seated in the witness row. And to you, Miss Mendez, thank you for stopping me before I destroyed more lives, including my own. The judge struck the gavel. Victoria Sterling on the charges of aggravated assault, causing serious injury, endangering an unborn child, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to conceal a crime. I sentence you to 8 years in federal prison. Aggravating factors were noted. The victim was pregnant. There was an intentional cover-up, and there was a documented pattern of conduct over many years. Victoria was led away, but for the first time in months, her face looked almost relieved, as if she no longer had to pretend to be strong, as if the mask had finally been stripped away, and painful as it was, the exposure itself felt like release. Victoria Sterling walked into prison not only as a convicted criminal, but as a woman who had finally seen herself clearly. Her sentence was 8 years, but the real punishment, and perhaps the only real healing, would come from living with the truth of who she had become. 6 months later, morning sunlight poured through the penthouse windows of the Salvatore family, laying warm gold across the oak floor. Emily sat by the glass with baby Sophia, 6 months old, cradled in her arms. The baby was fully healthy now, round pink cheeks, laughing bright and clean every time her mother kissed her forehead. Looking at her daughter, Emily still felt it like a miracle. That night she had nearly lost everything. Now she was holding this small miracle in her hands. The scar inside her was still there. She was still being treated for post-traumatic stress, still waking some nights with a start from nightmares, still feeling her heart race in certain moments when a loud sound hit the air too suddenly. But every day she was a little better. Every day the light pushed the darkness back a little more. Emily did not choose to hide inside the shadow of trauma. She chose to turn pain into strength. The Invisible Heroes Foundation was born 3 months after the trial, a foundation supporting victims of human trafficking and abused workers. Emily began appearing in public speaking about her past in front of thousands. I am a survivor of human trafficking. For 3 years I was treated as if I were not human. Her voice carried through the first conference strong and steady. That night at the restaurant, Victoria saw what she wanted to see. A poor woman who did not belong there. But she was wrong, not because of who my husband is, but because everyone belongs, everywhere. Your clothes do not define your worth. Your job does not define your dignity. Your appearance does not decide your humanity. The foundation received a massive anonymous donation, $10 million. Emily knew it was Dominic's money, but she did not ask where it came from. One evening, after Sophia had fallen asleep and the two of them sat together, Dominic spoke quietly. "Dirty money can do clean work. Let it." Emily looked at him and smiled faintly. "I am using blood money to heal wounds. There is something poetic about that." Dominic lifted an eyebrow. "Or ironic." Both Emily laughed. Dominic had changed. Still the Don, still the most powerful boss on the East Coast. But something was different. Less ruthless in the work, more time at home. Every night he was the one who rocked Sophia to sleep. Emily watched him hold their daughter, his voice gentle, and she spoke softly. "You do not need to change who you are, Dom." Dominic looked down at the sleeping baby in his arms. Those blue-gray eyes that were usually cold as ice, now strangely softened. "I am not changing who I am. I am choosing who I want to be. For her, for you." This little one deserves a father, not just a Don. Rosa Mendez had a new life as well. Dominic gave her an apartment in the best part of Brooklyn and a retirement fund large enough for her to live comfortably for the rest of her days. Her granddaughter received a full college scholarship. Rosa was invited to serve as an ambassador for the See the Invisible campaign, honoring invisible workers. She spoke at conferences, schools, and companies across the country. I scrubbed floors for 15 years. People walked past me every day without seeing me. Rosa told a crowd of hundreds, now I speak to thousands. Not because I changed, but because I finally understood my voice has value. You do not need power to make a difference. You need courage. And a phone. Be the one who sees. Be the one who speaks. Be the one who acts. Marcus Chen was promoted to head chef at the Salvatore family's new restaurant. He trained staff in dignity in service, a program he developed himself. We serve food, but we serve people first. All people. Fear kept me silent for years. I will not let fear win again. The Emily Carter Act was proposed in the state of New York, requiring restaurants, hotels, and service businesses to have procedures for reporting discrimination, mandatory training on unconscious bias. 12 other states were considering similar laws. The Dignity is Not Optional campaign spread across the country. The Obsidian reopened under new management, new policies. A sign was placed at the entrance. Every customer deserves respect. Every employee deserves to be treated with basic decency. No exceptions. Rosa Mendez was invited to cut the ribbon at the reopening. The cleaning woman, once treated like air, was now the guest of honor. From one night of injustice, a movement was born, not because of mafia power or money, but because ordinary people, a cleaning woman, a chef, a survivor, refused to stay silent. They proved change does not come from above. It rises from below, from the invisible, from the forgotten, from people like Rosa, like Marcus, like Emily, like you. That night, Victoria Sterling believed she had power, that she could slap a pregnant woman, throw her out like trash, erase the evidence, control the story. She was wrong. Not because my husband is Dominic Salvatore. Not because he has money, people, and the kind of reach that can make someone disappear. She was wrong because Rosa Mendez was watching an older cleaning woman with a phone and a conscience. She was wrong because Marcus Chen chose truth over fear, a chef who decided his dignity mattered more than his job. She was wrong because ordinary people refused to stay silent. Victoria forgot that invisible people are still people, that the person mopping the floor can be the one who exposes your truth, that the server you ignore can be the witness who changes everything. My husband could have killed her. He chose mercy because I asked him to. That was not weakness, that was strength. Real strength is not about how many people you can hurt. It is about how many people you can heal. If you see injustice, do not wait for someone powerful to come fix it. You are the one with power. Your voice matters. Your phone camera matters. Your choice to speak up matters. See the invisible. Listen to the silenced. Stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. Because justice does not come from above. It rises from below, from Rosas, from Marcuses, from nobodies who decide to become somebody, from people like you. Morning sunlight filled the room. Emily, Dominic, and baby Sophia sat by the window. Rosa came to visit, holding the baby in her arms. A radiant smile on a face lined with years. This little one will change the world, Rosa said. Emily smiled, looking at the cleaning woman who had become a close friend of the family. She has already changed it because of you, Rosa, because you chose to see me. Rosa shook her head, her eyes shimmering. No, Mija, because all of us chose to see one another. 3 generations, 1 family, a bright future. Justice had been done. This story gives us a deep lesson about the value of courage and the power of a voice. In life, sometimes we think we are too small to make a difference, but Rosa proved the opposite. An ordinary person with a conscience and determination can change the world. Never underestimate your own strength. Never stay silent in the face of injustice. And never forget that everyone deserves respect, no matter what they wear, what they do, for a living, or where they come from. If this story made your heart stir, please hit the like button and share this video with anyone who needs to hear the message that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. Do not forget to subscribe to our channel so you do not miss moving stories every day. How did this story make you feel? Did it bring up anything from your real life? Have you ever witnessed injustice and wrestled with the decision to speak up or stay silent? We would truly love to hear what is in your heart. Leave a comment below so we can talk together. We wish everyone watching this video good health, a joyful life, and peaceful days ahead. Thank you for being with us. Goodbye, and we will see you again in the next video.